Hi, I'm Tom Orr of Village Church, and welcome back to the stories Jesus loved to tell. Let me invite you to pause the video now and to read from Matthew, the 13th chapter. Read verses 24 through 30. I'll wait while you do that, and when you finish, come back and we'll begin the conversation. Dr. James Sanders once said, "The Jewish faith has a theological problem. Given that the world is so evil, why has the Messiah not yet come?" He said, likewise, the Christian faith has a theological problem. Given that the Messiah has come, why is the world still so evil? This was the concern in Matthew's congregation. If Jesus is Lord, why are there so many weeds in the wheat fields of our lives? You see, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ promises a new life, a changed life, a transformed life, a life sown with good seed. Jesus, as Lord of life, promises the kingdom of heaven has come near. But Matthew's congregation, they looked around and they saw a world that in many ways seemed to be untouched by the lordship of Jesus Christ. The world seems to be anything but the kingdom of God that Jesus speaks about. The wheat fields are invaded by weeds, so to speak. Now, no doubt, there is good, abundant good in this world, but the garden is filled with weeds. Now, I confess of the stories that Jesus tells, this parable is not an easy one. There are things in it that still confuse me. Who is this weed-sowing enemy? And what does it mean, leave them to grow together? Given the complexity of this story, I first want to say some things I'm convinced this parable is not teaching us. You see, if this parable is lifted from the gospel narrative, it can be a dangerous word. If it's lifted from the narrative of Jesus' ministry, it can be dangerous. Now, that's true for most texts. They're not intended to be tweezered out of their context. If we do that, these words of good news can become words of bad news for us. Take this parable out of its context, and it could be understood to say, in the kingdom of heaven, weeds and wheat are sown together, and the faithful just live that way. The police report domestic violence is growing, but you know, there are weeds and wheat sown together. Just leave it alone. Let God sort it out at the end. They're fighting in Israel-Palestine. Well, they've been doing that for thousands of years. What are you going to do? There are weeds in the wheat. Just leave it alone. The planet is shifting as the carbon content in the air is increasing. Well, you know, weeds and wheat, global warming, what can anyone do? That's not the gospel. As my friend Tom Long points out, the kingdom of heaven does not call the followers of Jesus to sit in the face of evil and do nothing. The ministry of Jesus was not just about getting us into heaven. It was first about getting some heaven into us. When it comes to facing the evil in this world, the disciples of Jesus Christ are to be engaged in the struggle for a more faithful, a more just, a more holy and human world. We are to engage in that work. It was years ago now, a member of our church named Shirley, who had a business of cleaning houses. She said she would come to our home every other Thursday and help clean the house. Shirley was wonderful. Carol was working, I was working. We had little ones underfoot. There was meetings at the church going on in the evenings, on and on. So Shirley would come every other Thursday and spend a few hours just straightening and cleaning the house. This meant that every other Wednesday, Carol and I would engage in the practice of waiting for Shirley. Now, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, that means I would come home from church and I'd sit down in my chair and Carol would say, "Would you go clean the kitchen? Shirley's coming tomorrow." And I would say, "But Shirley's coming to clean. Why don't we let Shirley clean the kitchen?" Carol would say, Tom, how can you expect her to clean if everything's a mess around here? Now go in there and clean the kitchen. Now look, I never understood exactly how this worked, but my testimony is that every other Wednesday I fell into bed exhausted getting ready for Shirley. That's what it's like to be a follower of Jesus Christ. We participate in what He said was coming. We don't outsource faithfulness. The kingdom of heaven calls our every moment to participate in the life that we have witnessed in Jesus Christ. This is one thing to identify that this parable does not mean. We're not called to just be quiet in the face of evil. But that concern is balanced with a second concern. The parable says God will burn up the weeds, cast out that which is evil, destroy that which erodes abundant living in our world. So aren't we to participate in that struggle as well? Should we participate in destroying the weeds? No, I don't think so. You see, the danger here is that, well, we're going to identify ourselves as the wheat. And therefore those who do not live as we do must be the weeds, and they need to be destroyed. Karen Armstrong, in her book, The Battle for God, notes that a startling development in the last half of the 20th century was the explosive emergence of militant faith in every monotheistic religion, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And a common result of this militant faith is that those who do not share their perspective of God are deemed weeds and are ostracized and sometimes destroyed. We have seen the pain that such militant faith can bring. Master, do you want us to gather up the weeds and prepare them for burning? No. That's mine to do, God says. The day will come when all that destroys life, all that erodes life, will be burned in God's holy fire. The day will come when the powers of death will be consumed and be no more. But that's mine to do. If we are not to embrace an ethical quietism, and we are not to root out the evildoers, then what are we to do? If I understand this parable, it calls us to recognize the honest but delicate balance that in the heart of every follower of Jesus Christ, there's a collection of weeds and wheat. We are the field. Such a recognition that we're all a mixed bag, so to speak, necessitates a degree of humility, but also a measure of hope. I say humility because even at my best, I am still not who God intends me to be. I don't escape the limits of my own righteousness. Think about it this way. Think about your most important relationships. Think about the people you love most deeply and care about most generously. And how faithful are they? Think about the relationships to which you have given your whole heart. But even in those relationships, there's injury, there's disappointment, there's failing. We all need to be humble because in our hearts there's weeds and wheat. But the fundamental word of this parable is not just humility. It's primarily a word of hope. If I've ever understood the truth of this parable, I understood it with Jean. It was years ago. I was visiting with her. It had been more than a year after the death of her husband. We were sitting at her kitchen table, and she said, Tom, it's been more than a year, but it's still so strange. We were married for 53 years. I can't remember not being married to the man. There's nothing that I do now that seems complete. He was a part of everything. I said, he surely did love you, didn't he? She surprised me. She looked at me with a bit of surprise, and she said, he did, didn't he? It's amazing, really. I wasn't really sure what she meant by that. She said, I never really understood why he loved me so deeply. I can think of a million reasons that he shouldn't have loved me, but he loved me every day. Can you believe it? This is what she knew. We're the field, all of us. We're a mixed bag. a collection of beauty and brokenness, of blessing and burden, of faithfulness and fear. And even with those we love the most, we sometimes fail. Even with those we love the deepest, we recognize they're weeds in the garden of our hearts. But here's the thing. In the end, it's the wheat that will last. It is the wheat that will last. Because love is stronger than hate. Goodness is stronger than evil. Compassion is stronger than apathy. Master, do you want us to weed the garden? No, I don't think you would know how. Just keep loving. That's enough for now. Just keep loving, because it is your love that will last.